Well, may I deal with the second one first?
By all means.
Clearly, we do want civic education in schools, for example. We want to have citizens informed that elections are going to take place and that they should come out to vote. The trouble is that general civic education tends to be a different function from the function of the nitty-gritty of election organisation. And what we found in Britain was that it's very tempting for an election commission to engage in that rather than in the more difficult and less glamorous task of making sure that Mr. So-and-so and Mrs. So-and-so on 155 number on that street is registered or isn't registered. And so they'll tend to go after the soft activities of promotion rather than the core activities of election administration. So that's the reason of wanting to remove the temptation to do something else. Now, where should it be? This will depend on the activity. I mean, clearly if schools are involved, then we want to make sure that it's those authorities that are responsible for education. If it's public information, there are usually, in Britain, there's a central office of information which is engaged in public information campaigns, and so it could well be a body that is responsible for public information there. And so I think there are numbers of answers. You obviously do need to ensure that the democracy promotion and the get out the vote is politically neutral. In other words, there isn't a temptation for a particular party to say, let's have a special campaign among a group that will vote for us in practice. And so there must be some confidence that it's all groups that are being targeted. But provided that that happens, then I think one of the educational public information bodies are a logical place for that. But again, provided that it's clear that the motive isn't to punish Elections Canada, it's to define functions properly and to enable them to be fulfilled in a more rigorous way. Now, you've asked about oh, sorry, do you want me to...
No, I just want to ask you one...
Do you want me to follow up on that?
Just one quick question. In terms of, you just made a comment about targeting specific groups. To remove this from any body in particular, just as a general principle, if you have any organization that's trying to promote fairly and neutrally and in a nonpartisan way, get out the vote, once the campaign starts focusing on particular groups, are you saying that that would then make it a less legitimate campaign? In other words, if it's not an equally distributed focus?
This is a very difficult question, and one in which I must admit I've not made up my mind. And let me tell you why. A number of years ago, almost as old as Senator Baker's years, I did a piece of work during Mrs. Thatcher's premiership. And we discovered, then as now, that there are certain groups that tend not to register to vote. Immigrants, young people, people in no fixed abode. And so there is a common sense reason to target efforts on those groups that are under-registered in order to register them. Okay, and there is a legitimate reason. Now it turns out that in Britain some of those groups disproportionately vote for the Labour Party rather than the Conservative Party. So that there is a motive for Labour to want to register them and for the Conservatives not to want to register them. Now, I have mixed feelings because on the one hand, I feel that public efforts need to go where those efforts are needed. In other words, that one shouldn't take note of the fact that immigrant voters are likely to vote Labour. If they're less registered than others, we ought to register them. On the other hand, there may be a temptation when one party is in government to try and target those groups that are likely to vote for it. And so in that way, there is the opposite argument that one should go across the board and not try and target particular groups, lest that turns into a party political set of motivations. So I'm not sure. I'd be very interested to discuss the principles on that further.
Thank you.
Okay,
I'm sorry
two.
to be so complex on that answer, but it is a complicated question. But again, I think that sincere discussion on different sides on this is the way to try and resolve that kind of thing. Now, as far as your other question about third parties, I do think that third parties often need to register earlier than later. Because if they're not registered with the Electoral Commission, you can have a lot of spending that goes on that just passes unnoticed. And in Britain, the registration of third parties for spending purposes has been insufficient and has allowed a lot of loopholes in our spending limits that we have had. As far as there being from outside, it is actually very difficult to define what is a foreign company from a domestic company. And the term foreign is difficult, say, with media, with many other corporations. I mean, what about an international corporation that has a branch within a country but is an international corporation? And so there is quite a lot of case law and discussion on that, but it's a different matter, a difficult matter. I would say, however, that early registration is desirable.
And so our wording is they must have a connection to Canada, but are you saying that that's kind of a useless definition?